this inquisition, but he certainly has the power to stop it. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Fundamental fairness. In the absence of fundamental fairness, we experience a cascade of deteriorating conditions. The erosion of trust, the weakening of social cohesion, alienation, marginalization, the legitimacy of authority diminishes, cynicism and disengagement grow, and ultimately, people abandon civic participation altogether. Fundamental fairness, Mr. Hochman, that's all we ask. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. As always, we welcome your feedback.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Today we have a great show planned. My very special guest is Lisa Mitchell-Senoir. Lisa is from a very, very rich family of civil rights background, and I want to share with you some of that because we're going to come fast to our come forward break. She is the grand niece, or the niece, if you will, of Perrin Mitchell. Perrin's father, Clarence Maurice Mitchell, was a waiter, and his mother, Elsie Davis Mitchell, was a homemaker. He was the younger brother of Clarence Mitchell Jr., who was an African-American civil rights activist, and he was the chief lobbyist for the NAACP for nearly 30 years. He also served as the regional director of the organization. Mitchell was nicknamed the 101st U.S. Senator. He waged a tireless campaign on Capitol Hill, helping to secure the passage of the civil rights legislation in the 50s and 60s, the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the Civil Rights Act of 1960, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act, Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Who can say that? Who can put that on their resume? Only in the history of the 20th century, Clarence Maurice Mitchell Jr. can do that. He gave birth, one of his sons, Clarence Maurice Mitchell III, was an American politician from Baltimore, Maryland, who served in the Maryland Senate and the Maryland House of Delegates. Mitchell served first in the Maryland House of Delegates, Legislative District 4, Baltimore City, from 63 to 67. Elected at 22, sworn in at 23. After 4 years in the House, he ran for the Maryland Senate and won. During the next 20 years, he represented the Senate, legislative districts 10, 38, and 39, all in Baltimore City from 1967 to 1986. During that time, he was the deputy majority leader, majority whip, member of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, co-chair of the Joint Committee on Federal Relations, and chairman of the Executive Nominations Committee. And of course, his son, Clarence Mitchell IV, who is one of our contemporaries, served in the Maryland House of Delegates from 1995 to 1999. But I'm focusing today on Perrin Mitchell. Born April 29, 1922, May 28, 2007, he expired. He was an American politician who served as a U.S. congressman affiliated with the Democratic Party representing the 7th Congressional District of Maryland from January 3rd, 1971 to January 3rd, 1987. He was the first African American elected to Congress from the state of Maryland and the first African American elected to Congress since Reconstruction. In '68, Mitchell challenged 9-term Democratic incumbent Sam Friedel in the Democratic primary, and he lost, but he did not stop there. He sought a rematch in 1970 and this time defeated Friedel by 38 votes in the general election. Every single vote counted. Mitchell was a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus. He is responsible or was responsible for the 10% set-aside program across military contracts and across the entire federal government for contracting. All of that is under attack today. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, we will be talking with Lisa Mitchell Senoir. Lisa is the niece of Perrin Mitchell and part of the great legacy of the Mitchell family. When we come forward.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580. If you missed our KBLA Talk 1580 Town Hall, the Altadena Eden Fire, 100 Days and Counting, you missed an evening of reverence, reflection, and reality.
You got to live in the reality because this is it. Every day you wake up, is this my life? Don't stay in denial because yes, it is. Don't stay in bargaining where you're praying for a miracle. If it wouldn't have happened, then this is what I would have done. It did.
Our panel participants kept it real. Really real.
I think, number one, it's amazing to me how we ignore systemic racism in our community. And as a people, we've apologized for so much. But when will we stop apologizing for what we have paid for? Because the truth of the matter is we paid for this.
You can always count on KBLA Talk 1580 to give it to you straight, no chaser. When you love folk, you tell them the truth. Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Do you owe $10,000 or more in credit card debt or personal loans? With credit card debt at all-time highs, Debt Relief Advocates is urgently notifying consumers of debt relief now being made available, designed to aid consumers with out-of-control credit card debt. Those who qualify and enroll for this relief program will only have to pay back a fraction of what they owe. This is not bankruptcy or a debt consolidation loan. This is a relief program that credit card companies would rather you not know about, as it ends your debt nightmare and saves you lots of money. Consumers owing at least $10,000 in credit card debt or personal loans can now take advantage of this debt relief as the cost of living skyrockets. Debt Relief Advocates has established a relief hotline for you to call to learn what debt reduction you may qualify for, so don't wait. For this free information, call the Relief Hotline at 800-388-6607, 800-388-6607, 800-388-6607.
You really about to do it?
40 acres in the mule, this is bigger than the music.
You really about to do it?
Yeah, they tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence.
Who among us doesn't like black music? But Kendrick is right. This moment is so much bigger than music. These are serious times. We've got serious problems, and we need serious people who understand that slogans are not solutions. When you want substantial and sober analysis about things that matter to you and the ones you love, this is where you turn. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black. Baby! Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest, Lisa Mitchell Senoir, is an experienced manager, liaison, administrator, and communicator, having worked, served, and volunteered in commercial, public, and non-governmental sectors. She is a member of one of the strongest civil rights legacies in the United States. Her family has fought for laws that made government and the private sector more inclusive, like the 1957 Civil Rights Act, the 1960 Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act of 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act. Lisa, welcome to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Well, thank you so much, sir. This is an honor. This is an honor, and in particular, to represent my family, to represent this legacy of all those ancestors. I want to say ashe. This is just beautiful.
Lisa, thank you for being here. Let me start with the matriarch.
Yeah.
Your grandmother, Elsie Davis Mitchell.
Yes. Yes.
What kind
Great
of woman was
grandma.
she?
Smart, loving, and strong. Great grandma Elsie, I didn't know her, but she was legendary. She understood that even though she did not have an education, she was going to make sure that her children did. If they wanted an education, she was going to access it. She had a big family, Baltimore City. They were not, they were challenged. They were a poor family. And her husband, my great grandfather, Clarence Mitchell Sr., was a head waiter. There were 7 children that survived. There were a few that died during the influenza. It was a really tough time because in Baltimore City, not indoor plumbing in some of the areas where Black people had to live in the early part of the 20th century. So it wasn't pleasant. But great grandma realized she took in laundry in order to make a living so that her children wouldn't be latchkey kids. She's going to make sure that she was home when they were home. And my grandfather, Clarence Mitchell Jr., was the oldest son. Great uncle Perrin was the youngest son, his baby brother, about 15 years younger than my grandfather.
I am overwhelmed by the influence of your family being in the right place at the right time, but also because they were from Maryland, a former slave state that chose to stay in the Union. And at the appropriate time, even in the Emancipation Proclamation, it excludes Maryland in terms of the question of freedom. And yet Marylanders gave United States colored troops to the Union Army to fight for freedom. At the appropriate time, Abraham Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation, and therefore Marylanders put the Union over the cause of slavery in trying to save the country. But at the appropriate time, they came to see that there was a relationship between freeing Black people and saving the country. You can save the country, but you're going to have to free Black people. You're going to have to free Black people if you want to save the country. That becomes important when we go through this family's legacy, because your family is very patriotic.
Yeah, my grandfather, Clarence Mitchell Jr., and Perrin, I have to say, because we want to talk a little about Perrin, great uncle Perrin, Congressman Mitchell, his birthday was the 29th, just a few days ago. And you and I were just at the Perrin J. Mitchell dinner. You were our keynote speaker. You were the keynote speaker and really channeled the energy of Congressman Perrin Mitchell, who was one of God's, he was labeled one of God's angry men. But righteous indignation. If you ever, and you met a great uncle Perrin, he was a guy, I mean, talk about just dynamic. He realized God opened his mouth and nobody was going to shut it. As a young man, growing up in Maryland was mean. I mean, let's just say this. My grandparents, great grandparents used to talk about Maryland. That's not quite the space that I grew up in, but when they were an early part of the 20th century, early 1900s, his father, my grandfather, his big brother, my grandfather, Clarence Mitchell Jr., covered one of the last legal lynchings in Maryland in 1933. So Uncle Perrin's born in 22. He's 11 years old. His big brother is covering a lynching. Like, what does that look like? My grandfather was 23 years old, Lincoln grad, coming back, no jobs, the Depression, has his first job as an Afro reporter at the newspaper, and is sent to cover a lynching of another 23-year-old, George Armwood, on the Eastern Shore. Didn't know if he would even survive because they said, if you come down to cover it, we'll kill you. But the Afro Archives, he and others went down to cover it. They went down, the body was still smoldering. The lynching had taken place. This man was not guilty of a crime, dragged from his jail cell, killed before he was even lynched, burned, body parts taken, and then left on a trash heap. And my grandfather, 23 years old, goes to cover that. Talks to the people, they're all in the crowds. They said it was those Virginia people that did that, right? Series of articles. Comes back home. My great grandmother Elsie, always held dinner. No matter who came home last, the family's going to eat together. Modest, but a good family. They come in, my grandfather barely gets to sit at the table when he jumps up and he has to regurgitate, he throws up. It took him weeks to tell his little brother what had happened, what he had to cover, the horror. And great uncle Perrin said it forever changed his life and the course of both of their destinies.
A lynching A lynching,
lynching.
and sitting at the dining room table, the stench, the smell, the burning was all part of the senses that he had developed as a reporter covering a lynching. And Perrin never forgot it.
Never, never
Never
said it.
forgot it, and
Never.
brought that same story, that same segregated Baltimore reality, existential reality, to the Congress of the United States, and ended up not only founding the Congressional Black Caucus, but became one of the most effective legislators in the nation's history, particularly on causes of civil rights. Share with us some of Perrin's accomplishments.
So, founder of the Congressional Black Caucus, what I thought was one of the seminal moments in terms of Congressman Mitchell's career was when the Black Caucus chose not to attend the State of the State address for then President Richard Nixon. Important to note because we look at history in long lens, and when we talk about rules, and it's important when you think about Congressman Perry Mitchell, and I love that portrait of him because that's quintessential PJ, as he would be affectionately called, a rules person. He served in the military, and it's important to note that first because he was not drafted, but at the time when he went into graduated from high school, didn't have a job, and he told us the police scooped them up on the corner. They were just in their neighborhood and said, either you're going to join the army or guess what, you're going to jail. That's how he entered military service, left with a distinguished record, 2 Purple Hearts, shrapnel that he carried with him the rest of his life, came back on the GI Bill, went to college, ends up, I have to say, desegregating the University of Maryland's School of Social Work in 1950, which did not admit Black people. And I have to say, we're talking about Perrin, but it's the context of what he was around at that time. 1935 was the first case that they filed to desegregate the University of Maryland School of Law at the time. Donald Gainsbury. This was Charles Hamilton Houston, and one of Thurgood Marshall's early cases. Mr. Marshall was working in Baltimore for the NAACP, and Baltimore was a testing ground for some of the early cases that led to Brown. Won the early decision to desegregate the University of Maryland School of Law, but Maryland was so mean, they had to sue every individual graduate school to gain entrance. And there's a wonderful iconic photo of all of the plaintiffs who sued the School of Nursing, the School of Medicine. Uncle Perrin, great Uncle Perrin's school, sued the School of Social Work. And that building today is named the Perrin J. Mitchell School of Sociology, which is important to note because that history is important. He opened that up. The president of the university at that time sent a letter out to all parents in 1950 to say, your girls are not safe on campus because Perrin Mitchell is coming to campus. Can you imagine? That's the environment that he went to graduate school in, came out, taught at Morgan State University. So he goes to Congress. Have to set the scene. The family was always involved in civil rights from the time, as you can see, Uncle Perrin was a small child. My great-grandmother, his, I would say, grandmother-in-law, Lily Carroll Jackson, was the president of the Baltimore branch of the NAACP for 35 years. So by the time Uncle Perrin gets to Congress, he's already a part of a movement in Baltimore and in Maryland. And so that's what he's taking with him to Congress. And so one of the first things that he does after helping to found the Congressional Black Caucus, one of them was helping to found what we now know as the Minority Business Enterprise Programs. I mean, the legislation that was put into effect to put a set aside on all public construction projects that would be a carve out for minority participation. When they put that legislation in, there was less than 0.1% of government contracts were going to minorities, not Black people, any minorities. And you're talking about public money, government money. And Uncle Perrin understood with the rules, if you're putting an amendment, which he did, he started off with an amendment on a bill. And by doing that, that carve out was placed there. From that federal money flowing down to states all across the country, that is what helped to build the minority business enterprise programs all across the United States in cities and states across this country.
I want to touch on that for a moment because the particular context is that since Perrin came to Congress in 1970, the first African-American elected since Reconstruction from the South. The advocate, Perrin Mitchell, the congressman, came there fighting for minority set-asides. He passed the legislation. It became the law. For the last 50, 60, 65 years or so, Many members of Congress have built upon Perrin's legislation, expanding the program, bringing it into other directions, to NIH, to the Department of Education. They brought the program that Perrin initially passed to benefit across federal military contracts to just about every aspect of the federal government. And then here comes Elon Musk. Here comes Donald Trump going through all of the departments looking for these programs to cancel them. That's a particular context that's noteworthy, isn't it, Lisa?
Very noteworthy. And this is going to be one of the, I think, the defining moments in terms of our leadership, not just political leadership, but across our organizational landscape, across the organizational landscape, and our allies. When we look at the legislation that we were talking about, Jesse, when we're talking about 1957, 1964 Civil Rights Act, how many Black people did we have in Congress and in the U.S. Senate when those particular acts were passed, when those measures were passed? But we're looking at the framework of the NAACP, we're looking at the Urban League, we're looking at a cross section of organizations that use their votes in order to shepherd this legislation through. You don't get it. You were in the Congress. You don't get legislation if you don't get votes. And you get votes when you leverage, when you get legislation passed, when you leverage your votes. It's just as simple as that. We've got to be, go ahead.
No, one of the things that made Perrin so fascinating, and one of the reasons I idealized him while I was in the Congress for 17 years, was this. He was a 2-time Purple Heart recipient. You touched upon it. Perrin wasn't just another brother on the floor arguing for Black causes.
No.
Perrin had left part of himself literally on the battlefield.
Literally.
On two different occasions. He got 2 different Purple Hearts. And so when Perrin went to the floor of the Congress and he argued for his right as a soldier and other men and women who paid their dues to the nation, who sacrificed nearly their lives, and those who did sacrifice their lives for the country, that they still found themselves racially excluded from participating in the government that they had pledged and nearly lost their lives to defend. That was a very, very strong moral argument. And it's a very different argument that some of us who, went to high school, went to college, ran for Congress, got there and said, hey, I'm the first Black to get elected from this particular district. Perrin Mitchell brought with him the weight that not a single Black person had been elected to Congress since George White delivered his speech, the Phoenix-like, in 1901, that one day maybe we will return to Congress, and we don't get back to Congress until Perrin Mitchell comes. And he doesn't just come trying to be the first Black from Maryland. He comes to Congress trying to fix a major problem that existed in the society. Lisa?
Great Uncle Perrin, Congressman Mitchell understood without the economic piece, the other things just don't matter. And that's what Dr. King, before he left us, before he was taken from us, was talking about, is that without that economic piece, and when we're talking about government money, we're talking about all money. We're talking about make it fair. I was listening to commentary just before the show came on. It was fundamental fairness. And that's what you see in the legislation sponsored by Congressman Perrin J. Mitchell, the Congressional Black Caucus at that time, and a number of allies, because we've always had allies, people who were at least understood that if we don't make available fundamental fairness, we will not have a democracy. You understood that in your writing, Jesse, just in terms of this is America, and if we're not going to have fundamental fairness, well, we can fight for it. And that's how we got here. Not we, but that's how America was, the principles that it was founded on. And that's what Perrin understood with this economic piece. And one of the things he did was he founded the Minority Business Enterprise Legal Defense and Education Fund. We talked about that. He said, anything we fight for, then we've got to protect it. That's also the piece that sometimes we miss. Just like your garden, as soon as you plant it, the weeds can take over if you don't take care of it. And as soon as we started passing the legislation, the civil rights legislation, those other organizations started lobbying and moving to undermine the legislation. And so the Minority Business Enterprise Legal Defense and Education Fund, Perrin J. Mitchell, started before he left Congress. He was the first chair. The organization is still in existence, and their lawyers are fighting to protect MBE programs, not only on the federal level, but also in states across this country.
When we come forward, I want to return to the conversation about Perrin, but I also want to recognize that so many people ask us, with all that's going on in the country, what can we do? What can we do? Your uncle, CM Jr., let's call it CM2, Clarence
Oh,
Mitchell
oh,
Jr.,
great.
lobbied
Great
for
dad.
the NAACP for 30 years. 30 years. And that culminated in the 57 Act, the 60 Act, the 64 Act, the 65 Act, the Fair Housing Act of 1968. He was known as the 101st senator because he was in the face of every senator every day. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, Lisa Mitchell Cinema.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Esther Dillard with BIN News Now. Mike Waltz is out as National Security Advisor, according to multiple reports. This comes after Waltz faced scrutiny for mistakenly adding Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg to a Signal Group chat that discussed plans for a military strike. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine.
I'm not surprised that there is turmoil after the Signalgate fiasco.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is criticizing President Trump's first 100 days in office.
Donald Trump and House Republicans are crashing the economy in real time, and they are driving us toward a painful Republican recession.
Jeffries held a recent news conference calling on Republicans in Congress to put a stop to what he described as insanity. And Ryan Coogler's blockbuster Sinners will get another IMAX release this weekend. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
It's another night of elimination drama for LA's NBA fans. Tonight, it's the Clippers' turn to see if they can stay alive in the playoffs. Game 6 between the Clippers and Denver at the Intuit Dome in Inglewood. The Clippers are down 3-2. They need a win to force a Game 7 in Denver on Saturday. The Clippers are healthy. No players are on their injury list. 7 p.m. tip-off tonight on TNT. The Lakers' season-ending loss to Minnesota Wednesday night had a huge financial impact on a lot of people. More money have been wagered on the Lakers than any other team to win the NBA championship, according to multiple sports books in Vegas. One person bet $100,000 at 10-1 odds that the Lakers would win the title. Mark this date on your calendar, June 29th. That's the deadline for LeBron to decide if he's going to exercise his player option to come back for a 23rd season. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Whoa,
KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
The Comedy Connection series featuring KBLA's Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, and the alpha male of comedy, Ray Grady. We're going to transform relationship disasters into stand-up material live at Inglewood's Miracle Theater on May 31st at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. My clinical team will disclose all of your dating woes, while the alpha male of comedy, Ray Grady, has hand-selected supremely talented comedians to roast all of our tragic relationship choices. I dare you to bring your ex's phone number because Ray, he's going to text it live and the crowd will be sourcing emojis. Tickets are moving swiftly, so don't hesitate to grab yours at themiracleinglewood.com before I diagnose your dating history as a pre-existing condition.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I want to, Lisa, just for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to let you have it. I want to talk about the commitment to engage in 30 years of advocacy, walking up and down the halls of Congress, talking to segregationist members of Congress and senators, and convincing them that they have something to vote for and something to gain in the 1957 Civil Rights Act, in the 1960 Civil Rights Act, in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. These are people who are born into congressional districts, into cultures, into circumstances that makes nothing natural about voting for the Negro cause and the cause of sex discrimination, race discrimination, class discrimination, part of their reality. And yet your grandfather champions that cause for 30 years on the floor and in the halls and in the offices and in the back rooms and in the smoke-filled rooms of Congress. That's real dedication to the cause.
Yeah.
And that's different than where the lights are. The lights may be at the I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
The lights may be covering Rosa Parks. The lights are clearly in Chicago covering the funeral of Emmett Till. I'm not negating the significance of those events, but there's also another activity taking place, and the Mitchells were at the forefront of that activity.
Let me tell you, having talked to my grandfather, talked to the elders about this, they saw in Grandpa in particular, saw in most people humanists. You know, understood that many people are maybe want to do the right thing. If you explain to them, if you talk to them, if you appeal to the humanity, if you find out what motivates them. And one of the things that I think Grandpa Clarence Mitchell Jr., sorry, I didn't say Clarence Mitchell Jr., my grandfather, understood. He studied people. He met Lyndon Johnson before Lyndon Johnson was president. His brother-in-law, Carl Downs. If you ever look him up, Reverend Carl Downs, he was Jackie Robinson's mentor. He was president of Sam Houston College, now Houston Tillotson, in the 30s. He was like one of the youngest college presidents. He was married to my grandmother's sister, Marion. And in Texas, Lyndon Johnson was approachable to some in the Black community, not to the standard that we would think of liberal here, but someone that you could reason with, someone that you could talk to. And so my grandfather got an understanding of who Lyndon Johnson was when Lyndon Johnson was a senator, when he was in Congress. And he had earlier heard about him through his brother-in-law, Carl. So you get to know people. It was actually Lyndon Johnson who helped water down the early civil rights legislation because it wasn't in his political interest. But it's that same Lyndon Johnson who my Clarence Mitchell Jr. understood, looked at the long arch of history. How do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered? And looking at that, and that is where you get the March on Washington. That is where, unfortunately, the martyrs, the horrific violence that for Emmett Till, for a child to be violated like that, I was thinking about, Evers, Medgar Evers, who Grandpa had just seen a month before. He was back down and forth to Mississippi. He and Medgar and Mrs. Evers were very close because Grandpa knew, Clarence Mitchell knew his life was in jeopardy and what a strain that was on them. They were literally on the front lines. But it was those incidents brought to light that then helped the conversation along of, is this the kind of place that we are going to live in? Is this going to be the rule of law? And it didn't have to be. And then when you get the allies, I mentioned the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. At that time, Grandpa Clarence Mitchell Jr. was the legislative chairman, so he wasn't lifting on his own. You're using the wherewithal of a coalition of other organizations that are not just Black and brown, okay? We've always had allies. I tell my kids, if we hadn't had allies, we'd still be enslaved. If there weren't some white folks who didn't agree and put their lives on the line, we would probably still be enslaved. And
Lisa,
so it's going.
Lisa, I think the segregationist Johnson is a very Senator Johnson as segregationist and Texas politician is a very different person as President Johnson. I mean, obviously, the agitation in the streets clearly changed who he was. In the current administration, I mean, we've had 4 years of his administration, 4 years of him being out of office, now another 100 days of him being in office. There just doesn't seem to be any kind of, he never rises to the occasion of the office. He's just the same.
So this is different. You're talking about you have to know people now. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, right? And when you're all over the place, we don't know what the current president is going to do. But what we do know is he's not able to do anything by himself, and elections have consequences. And when we have members in both houses that are not sympathetic, that's a problem. When we don't have the kind of voter participation and engagement starting at the local level, local elections still have consequences now, but starting local and building up, we can make a difference. One midterm can make a difference in terms of trajectory of what's, certain people want to accomplish.
Lisa, let's talk about the coalition and the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and your grandfather, C. Jr., who was the legislative chairman.
So what they realized then was that they each had strength in terms of the number of legislators who they could get to. With the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, whether you how many organizations were in it? It was NAACP, the Urban League, go through the list. It's just numerous organizations were in it. Some non-Black organizations as well were founding members of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. And so when you're talking about actually looking at votes for legislation, they looked at the Congress as a map. Okay, which organizations, do we have anybody in Texas? Do we have anybody in New Hampshire? Do we have anybody there? And strategically, each organization looking at attacking those or getting the votes of those members. And if not their votes, realizing, okay, that's one we can't count on. That's one we can't. Grandpa helped us to understand, Clarence Mitchell Jr., it's just as simple as doing the math. You have the votes or you don't. And most members of Congress want something. They want something that they can only get if they get the number of votes they want. Some of it is a bit of trading. Oh,
that's a kind of war room. I mean, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. Maybe it's taking place. Maybe I'm so cold and so out of it for so long that I'm not clear. No. But is there a war room of the organization saying, hey, we've got allies here, we've got allies here. Can we move this legislation even with a conservative or Republican Congress, with a MAGA Congress, a MAGA Senate? Is there a war room taking place anywhere where, the effective amendments that we believe should be part of the legislation could be added? Do you sense that any of that's taking place like your family led back in that period?
I think it's beginning to bubble. You see it in the response, the tremendous response to some of the town hall meetings that members of Congress are having. You see it in the response to organizations like ASALH, Association of African American Life and History. They've been having open town hall meetings and thousands of people showing up. It's going to have to bubble up from the people. It is not going to be right now the elected representatives that are really going to be able to navigate this. It's really going to have to come from the ground up. And we've gotten, frankly, we're at a point in time, we've not seen this in our lifetime. Like I was born in 63, so I was young enough to remember the 65, 64, some of those things were happening as I was young. But not since, I'm sorry.
No, that's a technical issue. Sorry.
That's sorry. Not since then. Let me just say this. Not since the Reagan years. That was familiar. I had to dial it on back. But it's going to take the ground up. And I really, at this point, am not seeing the coalition of organizations in that way. They're coming together. They are coming together. You see some of the, the gathering and that kind of thing. But strategically, right now, I don't see a Clarence Mitchell Jr. I'm not saying there aren't several people who are working on that front, and because I'm not behind the scenes in that way, but he dedicated his life to it. And honestly, the fact that we're talking about it hopefully is meaningful. The fact that we're talking about Congressman Perrin J. Mitchell is meaningful because there are people, they dedicated their lives to it. If we don't talk about the work that they did, who's going to want to do it? Who's going to want to do it? I invite the listeners to go to clarencemitchellpapers.com because my grandfather's biographer, Clarence Mitchell Jr., has spent the last 40 years actually documenting Grandpop's letters, notes, meetings. It's a roadmap as to how the legislation got passed. We've been years trying to talk about it, but it's been done. They've left us a roadmap in terms of, and none of them were elected to office. Grandpop was not elected to office. He was called the 101st senator, but all he did was advocate, write some of the laws, get other folks to actually position the legislation in a way that legislators can see it. You can give it to them, shape it for them, and then tell them that you've got the people power in order to ensure that they're not going to get primaried when they vote on that legislation. But I'm not seeing it to this extent now, quite frankly. I don't think you are either, not the organizing.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, we will have Lisa Mitchell, some closing thoughts, a couple more questions, some closing thoughts, and then I'd like to opine on just some of what she said today. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr.
The biggest names, the best conversations. You're riding with Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Why'd I go to the doctor? One day at the firehouse, I was so lightheaded I could barely stand. Even my crew noticed. Getting checked out was the right call. Turns out I have atrial fibrillation, which increases the risk of stroke about 5 times.
Symptoms like irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness can come and go. But if it's AFib, the risk of stroke remains. If you have symptoms, contact a doctor.
I'm so glad I did.
Visit notimetowait.com, sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
I feel so alone.
I'm embarrassed to talk about it.
How can I help my kid if I can't help myself?
I can't remember when I wasn't stressed.
I don't like to inside.
When you feel overwhelmed by your thoughts and emotions, it's okay to get help. You are not alone. CalHope is here for you with free, safe, and confidential mental health resources for youth, young adults, families, and you. Find support now at calhope.org.
Time is up. The IRS is in full collection mode for 2025, issuing liens, levies, and garnishments to anyone who has a past tax debt or unfiled tax returns. Don't wait till it's too late. Your paycheck and bank accounts are at risk of being seized. Call now and stop the collection process today. If you're living check to check, no matter how much you're making, you still may qualify for the Fresh Start programs offered by the IRS to reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. It's just a 5-minute call to get your options, and it's free. If you owe back taxes, have years of unfiled tax returns, under audit, have a wage or bank levy, or finally just want to sleep better, business or personal, call the experts at Republic Tax Relief while there's still time. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, and tough. This veteran-owned company has the fight you need to take on the IRS. Don't go at it alone. The call is free. Call their hotline number now, 800-259-4546. That's 800-259-4546. Find out if you qualify today. Call 800-259-4546 or go to republictaxrelief.com.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 is committed to self-care and community well-being. Walk Good LA was formed in June 2020, inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement and the beginning stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. What began as a few minutes of breath work and yoga meditation before protests against police brutality turned into a safe space for the community to heal in hard times. The immensely positive response from the community transformed the momentum into a movement. Today, Walk Good LA is a Black and Brown-led community wellness organization based in Los Angeles. They provide spaces for healing through community yoga classes, guided meditations, hikes, run clubs, and other activations throughout Los Angeles that attract hundreds of members weekly. With the help of Propel and Michael B. Jordan, they now have a yoga and wellness studio in Los Angeles called the Walk Good Yard. To join their mailing list and connect with healing spaces, please visit walkgoodla.org. That's walkgoodla.org. Or find them on Instagram at walkgoodla. This is a community call to action, a community call to healing from KBLA Talk 1580.
Barbecue season is back. Hey, it's Ellen. And this is Sarah Beth. And a little thing we love about the Chick-fil-A Smokehouse Barbecue Bacon Sandwich is that zesty barbecue sauce. I love that it was a little sweet, a little tangy, and with the mac and cheese. I feel like I tasted the brown sugar bacon first. It was the absolute best combination. Pro tip, 3 sandwiches are always better than 1.
Order the Smokehouse Barbecue Bacon Sandwich and a Coca-Cola on the Chick-fil-A app for a limited time. Real guests paid for their testimonials.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very dear friend, Lisa Mitchell Sinar, is our guest. Lisa continues the legacy of the Mitchell family for advocating and for implementing fair and inclusive policies. She's currently a Small Business Reserve Program Manager in the Maryland Governor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women Business Affairs. This office has oversight of the state's Small Business Reserve, Minority Business Enterprise, Veteran-Owned Small Business Enterprises, procurement programs across 70 agencies. Lisa is passionate about making access to opportunities and competition in state contracting more equitable, working with small business owners daily to connect them to the tools that they need to improve how they navigate and compete in the state contracting arena. Lisa, welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Let me just say this, Lisa, before I ask you a question and then have you close on a word of hope. I was thinking about something I believe Howard Thurman said, or maybe it was Gardner Taylor or Aubrey Hendricks, but I think it was Howard Thurman or maybe Dr. King. He went through ancient Egyptian history, talked about the myriad of gods that had existed. And then he reflected upon the gods of the ancient Greek civilization and some of the moral leadership of Socrates, Euripides, Aristophanes, and all of the other great Greek thinkers. Then he talked about the ancient Roman Empire and the Caesars who proclaimed themselves to be God. But Dr. King said, I think, or Howard Thurman said, at some point in time, on whatever spiritual journey you take, at some point in time, you must stop along the road and meet Jesus. That it's impossible not to meet him and have a broader, a better, and fuller understanding of just how divine God truly is. I can say that truthfully about my understanding of the history of the United States from 1619 to the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776, the writing of the Constitution, the addition of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, 1865, 66, 67, Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954. It is impossible to talk about progress for the Negro in America unless you come by and meet Clarence Mitchell Jr. You've got to come by and meet Perrin because they became the most effective legislators and lobbyists on behalf of our people that enshrined what we believe in the law of any other African Americans that have ever lived. It's impossible to say, I'm gonna do this for Black people. I want to help Black people. But if you don't stop by and meet Clarence Mitchell Jr. first, if you don't stop by and say hello to Perrin, and get a better understanding of how they had to do it, it's nearly impossible. That legacy is yours. That is the legacy of your family.
It's the legacy of our family that's broad and wide. You can't talk about the Mitchells without talking about the Jacksons, without talking about the Clays, without talking about the breadth. And I don't even mean to say your father's name was what your father did in terms of opening up this democratic process and the tentacles all across this country and across the world. You know, this is in our lifetime. He did that, and you build on that, and your siblings build on that. But I want to say that, you know, my grandmother, my grandfather's wife, and they were a beautiful partnership. She was the first Black woman to practice law in the state of Maryland, Juanita Jackson Mitchell. She and my grandfather together, great union. She said, we've seen miracles. She said, Lisa, we've seen miracles in our lifetime. To have the laws, to see every branch of government working, but they attacked all of them. It was legislatively, it was through the courts, you know, it was through through the executive branch, and they understood all those moving pieces. We have that brilliance among us. Amorphic Union, the book that you wrote, we have that brilliance in our midst. We just have to harness it. We've been here before in a similar place, but we've got the benefit of those great warriors who fought many of these similar battles. We've got their battle plans that they left for us. So I'm very, very hopeful. I'm going to mention something out there. Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. If you Google that in Baltimore, Maryland, it's a group of young people who were college students who decided that they were going to begin to advocate and reform legislation in the state of Maryland and in Baltimore City. They are a great group of young people who are actually writing legislation, dealing with prison reform, dealing with cannabis, dealing with how we look at the landscape of life in Black America and reparations. We are producing young people who are thinking in a different way, and they're able to organize in a different way. We need to tap into some more of that. Because it's always been the young people who've led the movements, by the way, you know that, you know, whether you're talking about South Africa or here, it's the young people. It's not our age. We're not doing it. You know, we're sitting and advising. And so I am very, very helpful. I put in the chat, you know, LillyCarrollJacksonMuseum.org, ClarenceMitchellPapers.org. This is out here for us to harness, and please join an organization. The NAACP, the Urban League, Rainbow Push. You cannot organize by yourself. You have to have and participate in these organizations.
Lisa, I had Grayson Herbert's family on Monday, and Grayson read her letter to the nation, to the world, on respect. Yesterday, my guest was Joey Jackson and Reverend Todd Yeary, both lawyers, one out of Baltimore, and one is obviously
one of my
nationally
neighbors.
Esteemed. And we talked about Grayson, age 11, as our future.
Yes.
We have just a few minutes left in our program. Share with us the kind of hope that Grayson represents and what you think is coming next. You've touched upon it briefly in terms of young people being engaged, but Grayson this week has given us a tremendous amount of hope. Lisa?
So the hope is our children. Don't ever count out a child. You know, I remember as growing up, my great-grandfather, as a 10 or 11-year-old living in Carrollton, Mississippi, saw a lynching, saw some of his relatives being lynched. When he moved up here to Baltimore and married my great-grandmother, Lily Carroll Jackson, they became this dynamic team. When Clarence Mitchell was a little boy, Clarence Mitchell Jr., a little boy living in a poor neighborhood in Baltimore, and their family was being evicted because they could not afford the rent. They said, oh, those Allie Mitchells, they'll never amount to anything. Well, that's not what their mother said. That's not what their father said. And he ended up being the 101st senator. We don't count out children. I listened to children. And that Perrin J. Mitchell, as a little boy, came home and saw his furniture out on the street. But he stayed in school. And people don't know that about the Mitchell family. And then there is a memorial being unveiled on behalf of Perrin Mitchell, May 28th of this month in Annapolis, of all places in Annapolis, for Maryland's first Black congressman. I have hope. With this administration or any other one, we have to have hope. We've got these young children out here, our young scholars who are out here, who are telling us, you know, informing us as to what the future, the kind of future that they want to live in. We just have to listen to them and support them.
I am overwhelmed by what this family represents. I'm also overwhelmed by, you know, what my own family has represented across more than 5 decades of public leadership. And it's really a ministry. I mean, I don't know a way around it. You don't get rich in this game. It's nothing other than a ministry. You believe in it. Again, 30 years on Capitol Hill for Clarence Mitchell Jr., earning the trust and the respect of members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to get something done for us, because we need Democrats and Republicans to get it done.
Yes, we do.
Where are the Clarence Mitchell Juniors today, working, even if they're not members themselves, who are bringing the Democrats and the Republicans together to get something done for us? Well, that's what Clarence Mitchell did. Clarence Mitchell Jr. brought home to his brother a story complete with sensory ramifications. A story about a lynching that he had to record for his newspaper. And it was so devastating and so overwhelming that it impacted young Perrin Mitchell, who found a way in the Congress of the United States to expand the African-American middle class through government contracting. So much of that legacy is under attack today. Our very special guest in this hour has been Lisa Mitchell Sinar. Lisa, we're so grateful for your family, and thank you for being on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you so much.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, it will be tomorrow, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for joining us.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.